Yes, I'm Ariana Eltz. I'm
You're breaking up a little
timekeeper
bit.
for the prosecution.
Okay. And for the defense?
Hi, I'm Sierra Speth, and I'm the timekeeper for the defense.
All right, wonderful. Then let's begin. Are there any preliminary matters from the prosecution?
Yes, Your Honor. First, the prosecution just asks that, in accordance with typical mock trial proceedings, we're allowed to introduce ourselves as well as our witnesses.
You may.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. My name is Colby Cruiser, and today I will be giving the direct examination of Detective Jordan Markowitz, the cross-examination of Professor Blake Van Owen, as well as the closing argument.
Thank you, Mr. Cruiser.
Good morning, Your Honor, members of the jury, opposing counsel. My name is Desmond Decker, and today I will be leading the direct examination of Alex Cifuentes, and I will be delivering the cross-examination of Taylor Perkins.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, opposing counsel. My name is Marissa Ross. Today I'll be delivering the opening statement, the direct examination of Kyle Cusack, and the cross-examination of Avery Becker. At this time, I ask that our witnesses be allowed to introduce themselves.
They may.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury, opposing counsel. My name is Tanner Moore, and today I'm Alex Cifuentes.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, and members of the jury. My name is Gavin Channel, and today I'm Detective Jordan Markowitz.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. My name is Justin Keith, and today I'm Kyle Cusack.
All right, welcome everyone. Let's turn to the defense, please.
Hello. In our pre-trial matters, Your Honor, we ask that we be able to introduce ourselves as well.
You may.
My name is Annalise Wampler, and I am going to be crossing Kyle Cusack, directing Avery Becker, and giving the opening statement.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury and the opposing counsel. I am Ben Kirshner, and I will be directing Taylor Perkins and crossing Alex Cifuentes.
All right, and Mr. Kirshner, I'm going to need you to get closer to your speaker because you're pretty hard to hear. Next, please.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury, opposing counsel. I'm Libby Cruiser, and today I will be conducting a direct examination of Professor Blake Van Owen, a cross-examination of Detective Jordan Markowitz, and giving a closing argument. May we introduce our witnesses now?
You may, Ms. Cruiser.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Eliza Harper, and today I will be playing the role of Avery Becker.
All right, and Ms. Harper, same thing with you. I'm going to ask everyone, just try to get as close as you can to your speakers and so that we can hear you better, all right? Next.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury, opposing counsel. My name is Connor Batcher, and today I will be portraying the role of Blake Van Owen.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. I'm Stana Fisher, and today I will be portraying the role of Taylor Perkins.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. This is, I've been doing a lot of WebEx hearings and so forth, but this will be my first mock trial doing the entire thing via Zoom. At any rate, are there any preliminary matters from the prosecution before I swear in the witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor, just a few from the prosecution. First, the prosecution asks that when introducing exhibits, evidence be presented but constructively kept from the eyes of the jury until the witnesses both identified the exhibit and the exhibit has been admitted.
For the defense, any response?
That sounds good, Your Honor.
All right, that motion is granted, Mr. Cruiser.
Your Honor, I understand that I previously heard you discussing this with another scoring panelist, but we ask that in the case of any internet failures or crashes, time may be paused at your command.
Yeah, if that happens, just as preliminary matter for any of you, let us know. And we will ask the timers to stop the clock. All right, but I'm gonna have to rely on you because all I'm seeing right now, sometimes, I'm not sure, I can't remember on Zoom. On WebEx, we get a little triangle that indicates that the feed is not very good. I can't remember what Zoom does.
It does not do that, Your Honor.
So how are we going to know that?
I'll try to watch.
Okay, that somebody's having a slow feed. Okay. Just let me know, everyone, and we will take a timeout. Okay? Next,
right.
Mr. Cruiser.
Thank you. And then our last pretrial matter is just we ask that stipulated facts from this case be published to the jury and that jury instructions will be constructively read to them as well.
For the defense, any response?
That sounds good, Your Honor.
That motion is granted.
No further pretrial matters from the prosecution, Your Honor.
Turning to the defense, any pretrial matters?
No pretrial matters, Your Honor.
Let's, if I can have all the witnesses turn their video feed on and raise your right hand, please. I should have a couple more. All right, raise your right hand, everyone. Bring your right hand in a little bit. Let's see. Yeah, there we go, 6. All right, do you solemnly swear under penalty of perjury that the testimony you'll provide to the court this afternoon shall be the truth?
Yes, Your Honor.
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 Anyone else? I think we got them
Yes,
all.
Your Honor.
Wonderful. All right, then let's begin with opening statements, please. Does the prosecution wish to make an opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Ross.
May it please the court. Half-hearted, hypocritical, and a whole-filled alibi. Today you are going to hear about the events of March 6th, 2020. You are going to hear the story of Avery Becker, a promising mock trial student with a temper and a rocky history with the deceased. You are going to hear about the death of Mackenzie Brackman, a vengeful act of violence committed by Avery Becker as a desperate attempt at retribution. Now, today the prosecution carries the burden of proof. This means that we must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that on March 6th of 2020, Avery Becker unlawfully and feloniously committed or attempted to commit second-degree burglary. In doing the course or furtherance of that crime, the death of Mackenzie Brackman was caused by anyone. That on March 6th of 2020, Avery Becker knowingly broke into an entrance, entered, or remained unlawfully after a lawful or unlawful entrance into the dwelling of Mackenzie Brackman, with the intent to commit therein the crime of criminal mischief. Now, as we proceed through the case today, I ask that you remain focused on the facts, and you will believe beyond a reasonable doubt that Avery Becker committed the accused crimes. Between Avery Becker's whole-filled alibi and Blake Van Owen's half-hearted and hypocritical investigation, it will be clear what truly happened on that fateful March day. Now today you will first hear from Detective Jordan Markowitz, a homicide detective with the Denver Police Department. Detective Markowitz will walk you through his careful investigation and all that he saw firsthand at the crime scene. His years of experience and expertise will allow for him to prove all of the holes in Avery Becker's suspicious alibi, especially with the incriminating phone records. His passion for his work will also allow for him to show the flaws in Blake Van Owen's testimony and all that Blake Van Owen will present later on. Next, you will hear from Alex Cifuentes, one of Avery Becker's fellow peers and mock trial members. Alex will tell you about the disrespect that Avery continuously showed towards not only her fellow mock trial members, but especially Mackenzie Brackman, and the heated clashes and arguments between the two. Alex will reveal a different side to Avery, and show the rage that she could carry. Alex will also tell you about Avery's past encounters with Brackman, and it will be clear that Avery had both the intent and the motive to break into Brackman's house on March 6th, an event that eventually led to Brackman's death. Finally, you will hear from Kyle Kuzak, a crime scene reconstruction investigator employed by the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. Kyle Kuzak will tell you all about his rebuilding of the case of Mackenzie Brackman, about how he looked over every single piece of evidence and meticulously reviewed every single detail of the case, all to come to the conclusion that it was a burglary gone wrong, and that Avery Becker fits the narrative. Now today, the defense is going to try to paint the picture of an innocent high schooler who just lost her mock trial coach. However, this same high schooler has a history of having an explosive temper and committing wrongful acts when things don't go her way. The defense is also going to try to say that the work that Detective Markowitz was incomplete, and that the conclusions that Detective Markowitz and Kyle Kuzak came to were incorrect. However, both Detective Markowitz and Kyle Kuzak will provide a multitude of compelling evidence to prove their theories, and ultimately disprove Blake Van Owen's testimony. Half-hearted, hypocritical, and a hole-filled alibi. Today, I ask that you not get swept up in the stories, but instead remain focused on the facts and the flaws in the defense's case. The countless holes in Avery Becker's suspicious alibi, the lies told by her friend to keep their story straight, and the work of Blake Van Owen that was not only done without any heart or passion, but his words are also hypocritical to that of Detective Markowitz and Kyle Kuzak. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, at the end of the case today, I ask that you come back with a verdict of guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ross. For the defense, does the defense wish to make an opening statement?
Yes, we do, Your Honor. May I begin?
You may.
Atrocious, assumed, accused. Your Honor, members of the jury, this is a case that started with an atrocious investigation by the police that led to a number of assumptions and the wrong accusal of my client, Avery Becker. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my name is Annalise Wampler, and I am here with my co-counsel defending Miss Avery Becker, who has been wrongly accused of burglary and murder. Atrocious. You're going to hear that the prosecution completed an atrocious investigation that was rushed and incomplete. Expert witness Blake Van Owen will point out all the deficiencies in the prosecution's investigation, including the police's failure to fully investigate all suspects and consider Avery Becker's alibi. Assumed. The police made a number of erroneous assumptions in this case that will be detailed by their own witnesses. You have heard the prosecution say that Avery Becker murdered Mackenzie Brackman, yet their main evidence of this comes from screenshots of a text conversation that was never verified and allegations that Ms. Becker and her mock trial coach didn't always get along. The prosecution's own witnesses will reveal the number of erroneous assumptions that were made in this case. Detective Markowitz will testify that he heard about one conversation via text message and disregarded 2 other suspects. Detective Markowitz will also have to admit that he relied on incomplete cell phone records. Their own crime scene investigator, Kyle Kuzak, will testify that they found no DNA or fingerprints belonging to my client on the scene of the crime, but that the prosecution identified 2 alternative witnesses but failed to investigate either of them. The most likely suspect being another Colorado high school student named Blair Rowlands, who had an even greater motive to harm the victim. You will find that Kyle Kuzak can also only tell us how Coach Brackman was murdered, not establish who did it or why they did it. You will also hear from prosecution witness Alex Cifuentes, who also went to Colorado High School and always wanted the role that Avery Becker had on the mock trial team and never provided her phone to the police. Now, in the defense case, you will hear first from Professor Blake Van Owen. Professor Blake Van Owen will point out the many, many holes in the prosecution's investigation. Next, you will hear from Miss Becker's best friend, Taylor Perkins. Taylor Perkins will tell you that although Avery and her coach didn't always get along, that Avery would never murder her coach. Taylor Perkins will also verify Avery Becker's alibi. Finally, You will hear from the defendant herself, Miss Avery Becker, who will acknowledge her disagreements with the victim and who accepts full responsibility for all of her past mistakes. You will also hear about her missing cell phone and alibi for the time of the murder. Accused. The prosecution has wrongly accused my client of murder. Atrocious, accused, assumed. At the end of this case, I am confident that you will find that the prosecution has not met its burden of establishing Miss Becker guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of committing second-degree burglary and first-degree murder. At the conclusion of this case, we ask you to save an innocent girl from a terrible fate. We ask you to find Miss Becker not guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wampler. First witness for the prosecution, please.
Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution now calls Miss Alex Cifuentes to the witness stand.
Ms. Fuentes, I'll remind you that you are under oath. Let's begin questioning.
Thank you. Mrs. Cifuentes, could you please state your full name and spell your last name for the record?
Yes, Alex Cifuentes, Sifuentes.
Thank you, Mrs. Cifuentes. Now, please tell me a little bit about who you are.
I'm a member of the CHS mock trial team alongside Avery Becker and Taylor Perkins.
And what was your relation to Coach Mackenzie Brackman?
Mr. Brackman was a fantastic coach whom I greatly admired and looked up to.
And what is your relationship with the defendant, Avery Becker?
I consider Avery Becker to be one of my best friends, actually. She was actually the one who convinced me to join mock trial.
What can you tell us about your experience with Avery throughout mock trial?
Avery seemed to have a bit of a lackadaisical attitude. She would show up unprepared a lot of times, and she was pretty much a wild card. We never knew if she'd be prepared or not.
Based on your observations as a member of the CHS mock trial team, what were the interactions like between Avery and Coach Brackman?
To me, it really seemed like they had a tense relationship. Mr. Brackman was always getting on Avery's case, telling her to be better prepared, but she never really seemed to listen.
What was the impact of Avery Becker's behavior on the team as a whole?
It seemed to kind of leave us not knowing if Avery would be able to pull it off in the end.
What did you think of Avery's behavior and lack of respect for the team?
Personally, I really put a lot of time and effort into mock trial. I always prepared ahead of time, so it hurt a little bit when Avery would just trance in unprepared.
Did Coach Brackman ever say anything to Mrs. Becker about her lackadaisical attitude?
Yeah, he was always on her case, but she never seemed to do anything about it.
And at any point, did the relationship between Coach Brackman and Avery Becker grow to a boiling point?
Yeah, there was one day when Avery showed up late to practice for the umpteenth time, and as a result, Mr. Brackman demoted Avery to the B team.
Thank you. Did anything else happen after Coach Brackman demoted Avery?
Yeah, somehow Avery seemed to convince Taylor Perkins to quit mock trial so that by default she would be put back on the A team.
And what happened after Coach Brackman let Avery back on the A team?
Yeah, so after Avery was back on the A team, she won a bunch of awards at our regional competition, and it seemed to have another disagreement between Mr. Brackman and Avery after the fact.
And what happened between Coach Brackman and Avery?
Mr. Brackman, instead of congratulating Avery, told her that if she came this unprepared in the real world, it would be considered a malpractice.
Thank you. What was Avery's reaction to these harsh words?
Avery grabs what she claims was an expo marker and vandalized Mr. Brackman's super nice Porsche.
Did Mr. Brackman punish Avery for this behavior?
Yeah, at this point, Mr. Brackman did what any sane person would do and kicked Avery off the team once and for all.
And did Avery being kicked off the team help you at all?
I mean, I might have assumed a bigger role, but there's really no way to tell.
Would you have been able to compete at the competition without Avery?
No, there was no way for us to compete at state without Avery, so it was kind of pointless anyways.
Did you help Avery at all to reconcile for her actions?
I tried to talk to Mr. Brackman when Avery texted me, but Mr. Brackman wasn't going to change his mind.
Your Honor, permission to approach the witness with what has previously been labeled as Exhibit 14.
You may.
Mrs. Cifuentes, could you please describe what is contained within this document?
Yeah, these are text messages between Avery and I.
And did you take these screenshots?
Yes, I did.
And is this a true and accurate copy of the conversation between you and Avery?
Absolutely.
Your Honor, the prosecution now moves to admit Exhibit 14 into evidence as a record of the text communication between Alex Cifuentes and the defendant.
For the defense, please.
Objection, Your Honor. The evidence are just copies. It's not the exact evidence.
Mr. Kirshner, I can barely hear you. Again, please.
Your Honor, the evidence are just copies. They are not the exact evidence.
All right,
Your Honor, may I respond?
You may.
Yes, I believe he is trying to make a best evidence objection, to which I would say, since the phone of which these screenshots were taken is now no longer in our possession, this is the best evidence that we could present.
Objection overruled. The exhibit, tell me the exhibit number again is?
Exhibit 14, Your Honor.
Exhibit 14 is admitted.
Mrs. Cifuentes, could you please tell me a little bit more about Exhibit 14?
Yeah, after I had said that I doubt anything would be able to change Mr. Brackman's mind, Avery texted me, well, if he's still going to be upset about his car, then he's going to be really upset when he sees what I do to his house.
Now, could you please read to me what Avery Becker said that she intended to do to Coach Brackman's house?
Yeah, she said she was going to wait until he was at work and then break in and trash his house.
Thank you. And did you ever talk to anyone about the murder?
Yeah, I talked to a detective about it.
And what did this detective ask of you?
The detective just asked me about these text messages and if I knew anything else about Avery Becker.
Did you show the detective these messages here?
Yes, I did.
And what did the detective say about the messages contained within this document?
The detective told me the screenshots would suffice. They were just as good as if I had the phone in front of me.
Your Honor, let the record reflect that I will no longer be sharing Exhibit 14. Mrs. Cifuentes, did anyone else try to contact you after the murder?
Yeah, an investigator for the defense tried to contact me, but I wasn't interested in talking with them.
And at any point in time, did you use Avery's phone to text anyone?
Absolutely not.
And would you ever consider doing anything that would bring harm to your coach?
No, I loved Mr. Brackman. I would never harm him.
Thank you, Mrs. Cifuentes. No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Cross-examination, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. All right. You were on the mock trial team with Avery Becker, yes?
Yes, I was.
And you claim that you've always been really good friends?
Yeah, she was the one who convinced me to join mock trial. She's one of my best friends.
Yet you're here testifying in court for the prosecution?
Yes, I am.
You viewed yourselves as equally skilled?
Yeah, I do. I think we are both great contributors to the A team.
But you took your role in mock trial much more seriously?
Objection, Your Honor. This is to the relevance of how serious my client took mock trial. This has nothing to do.
A one-word objection, Mr. Decker. That goes for everyone. 1 or 2 words. Just state your evidentiary basis. Relevance is the objection, Mr. Kirshner.
I'll just move on. Next question, Your Honor.
Objection sustained.
A lot of people on the team couldn't stand Avery?
I mean, yeah, she was.
Objection, speculation.
Response, Mr. Kirshner?
This is just an observation, Your Honor.
Objection overruled. Answer the question, please. Ms. Fuentes.
Can you please repeat the question?
Yes. A lot of people on the team couldn't stand Avery?
It seemed that because Avery was never really prepared, it kind of hurt the team. We never knew if she'd be prepared or not.
And you didn't think that Coach Brackman should put up with Avery's behavior and lackadaisical attitude?
I mean, yeah, he always tried to talk to Avery, and Avery really never seemed to listen anyways.
Did it irk you that Avery could come up with things on the fly while an examination was going along?
Yeah, she seemed to have a tendency that she was really good at that.
And you also believe that Avery was just coasting on good looks and won awards on that basis?
Objection, relevance.
Response, Mr. Kirschner?
Is to share Avery and Alex's lack of friendship, Your Honor.
Objection overruled. Answer the question, Ms. Fuentes, please.
I'm sorry, could you please repeat the question?
Sure. You thought Avery was just coasting on her good looks alone and that she won awards on that basis?
I mean, Avery won a bunch of awards for our team, and she really did contribute to the team, so.
Your Honor, I think Ms. Moore might be frozen.
I can't hear the defense.
I believe I cut out there. Would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes,
Yes.
and Mr. Kirschner, I think you need to get closer to your speaker, please.
You thought that Avery did not win any awards based on any real talent?
I mean, but Avery did win awards for our team, so it doesn't really matter. I mean, she contributed.
After Avery was removed from the A team, were you upset that she was let back on?
A little bit, but at the end of the day, I mean, she contributed to the team, was a big part of it. We needed her.
Were you also upset that she had won Best Attorney Award and Best Closing Statement?
Yeah, that did hurt a little bit since I didn't win any awards.
So it was a slap in the face that she had won the awards?
A little bit, but it just pushed me to work harder.
Did you believe that Coach Brackman should have pressed criminal charges against Avery?
I mean, yeah, but at the same time, he's a really just sweet guy, and so I can see why he didn't in some way.
Because Avery was kicked off the team, your team was likely to forfeit the tournament.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Were you devastated?
I was, but it didn't end up happening anyways because of COVID.
Did you hope that Brackman could convince the committee to allow you to get a substitution?
Yeah.
If that happened, would you get a larger role with Avery gone?
There's a possibility.
Objection,
Yeah.
speculation.
Response, Mr. Kirschner?
It's just an observation, Your Honor.
Objection sustained. Next question.
Were you were told by Detective Markowitz, you told Detective Markowitz that Avery had sent you text messages?
Objection, hearsay.
Response, Mr. Kirschner?
The evidence of the text messages has already been admitted, Your Honor.
Is this in Exhibit 14?
Yes, Your Honor.
Objection overruled. Also, it's an 801D2 example. It's this is a party, and it's just a witness. This is party opponent.
This is not a
Fuentes,
party.
are you, huh? Is she a party?
No, Your Honor.
Just a witness. Never mind. Nevertheless, the objection is overruled. Answer the question, Ms. Fuentes.
I'm sorry, would you mind repeating the question?
Did you tell Detective Markowitz that Avery had sent you text messages?
Yes, I did.
But when you met the detective, you didn't even bring your phone to show the text messages?
I totally forgot my phone on the charger, so no, I did not.
Did you ever provide the phone so that they could verify these messages?
No, but the detective told me that screenshots would suffice, so that's what I sent.
Do you claim that you had no longer have the phone? Is this true?
I do not have the phone. Like I said, the battery was getting awful. It was time to trade it in anyways.
And do you have no idea where the phone is now?
I do not.
Yet you also claim that Avery's one of your best friends, but you refuse to talk to her investigator?
I mean, I'm only concerned with the truth, and most of the times they're only looking to get their client evicted.
Are you aware that you're being accused of faking text messages?
I was not aware of this.
So you don't know why the investigator was there to investigate you?
I mean, the investigator was only interested in getting their client evicted.
Okay.
And if that was to say that I was faking text messages, then I wasn't going to put up with that. I did my part, and sent the text messages into the detective.
Also, do you know Blair Rollins?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they go to our school.
And you are aware that Coach Bracken unsuccessfully defended Blair Rollins' father? and as a
Objection, relevance.
Response, Mr. Kirschner.
This is to share another potential suspect, Your Honor.
Objection sustained.
Had you seen Avery at the Fry Shack the night before the murder?
Yeah, I did.
While at the Fry Shack, Avery let you play a new game on her phone,
She did, yeah.
and you were the last person to have used her phone before it was lost?
Objection, speculation.
Response, Mr. Kirschner.
I'm just sharing what has been shared in the, it's just an observation, Your Honor.
Objection overruled. Answer the question, Ms. Fuentes, if you can.
I'm not aware if I was the last one to use his phone or to use her phone or not. Someone might have used it after me, but with my observation, I was the last one that I saw.
No more questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Cifuentes, following the murder, are you and Avery still friends?
Yes.
And without Avery, would you have been able to participate at state?
No, there's no way.
Did you offer to show these messages to the detective?
I did.
And why did you end up getting rid of the phone?
My battery was horrible. It was time to trade it in anyways, completely unrelated.
And so far as this phone, or so far as Avery's phone is concerned, did you return Avery's phone to her?
I did, yes.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Is this witness under subpoena? Mr. Decker?
Your Honor, could you ask that again? I'm sorry. I couldn't.
Never mind. Next witness.
Your Honor, the prosecution would like to call Detective Jordan Markowitz to the stand.
Mr. Markowitz, I remind you that you're still under oath.
Yes, Your Honor.
Good afternoon. Can you please state your first and last name and spell your last name for the record?
Of course. I'm Detective Jordan Markowitz. That's spelled Markowitz.
What is your profession, Detective Markowitz?
I work as a homicide detective with the Denver Police Department.
And how long have you been with the Denver Police Department?
I started there about 13 years ago, and I've been a detective for the last 7.
What do you do as a detective?
I handle all kinds of investigations. However, as a homicide detective, I handle cases like this, in which we have a deceased victim. I then further the investigation through conducting interviews, pursuing suspects, and spending lots of time at crime scenes.
What other specialized training do you possess?
My main specialty is with cell phones. I actually have a cell phone technology and forensic data recovery certification from the American Academy of Law Enforcement.
What did this course cover?
I learned about the types of cell phone data and records that can be obtained, how to use forensic software such as the Celebrite system that we use at the DPD to download information from a cell phone, how to acquire and interpret cellular records, and how to obtain and interpret cell tower data. It's all very interesting stuff.
Do you use this training in your day-to-day work?
All the time. I've downloaded the contents of hundreds of cell phones, and I've obtained and interpreted cell tower data in over 50 cases.
Your Honor, the prosecution moves to have Detective Jordan Markowitz designated as an expert in the fields of crime scene investigation, as well as cell phone technology and forensic data recovery pursuant to Rule 702.
You said cell phone?
Cell phone technology.
Okay.
And forensic data recovery, as well as crime scene investigation.
Right. For the defense?
Your Honor, may I conduct a brief voir dire?
You may.
Good afternoon, Detective Jordan Markowitz. Your specialized training and experiences with cell phones, correct?
Yes, I really love learning about that stuff.
You did not include any additional certifications in your witness statement, correct?
No, I have a certification from the American Academy of Law Enforcement, but other than that, my training was just from the Denver Police Department.
And you did not include any other types of training in your witness statement, correct?
Outside of my basic training at the department, no.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense has no objections to the admission of Detective Jordan Markowitz as an expert.
All right. Detective Markowitz will be accepted as an expert in area of crime scene investigation, cell phone technology, and forensic data recovery.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mhm.
Detective Markowitz, were you assigned this case?
Yes, I was assigned to investigate the death of Mackenzie Brackman in March of 2020.
What was the call that came into dispatch?
On Friday, March 6th, a passing motorist reported seeing a person possibly passed out on the porch of a residence at 444 South Flower Street. Paramedics responded and called for officers when the victim was found deceased just inside the front door of the residence.
When did uniformed police officers arrive on scene?
Officers secured the scene and I responded at 1420 or 2:20 p.m. Sorry.
What did you initially notice upon arriving at the crime scene?
The front door was wide open. The victim was face down on the floor just inside the residence in a pool of blood. There was a officers when the victim was found deceased just inside the front door of the residence.
When did uniformed police officers arrive?
Can we pause time?
Yeah,
Okay.
let's hold on. Would Kobe please, the participant Kobe, please mute the microphone. There you go. All right.
All right, I'll continue.
Mhm.
There was also a large knife visible on the floor just past the victim's body. The victim's shirt was blood-soaked around the left posterior acromial region, or the back of the left shoulder, and it was obvious that the victim had been stabbed.
Your Honor, permission to reflect exhibits 1 and 5 for the witness to see.
You may. And I probably neglected, let's take just a time out for the scorekeepers. At the very beginning, I neglected to state or ask if anyone who was on the screen wasn't affiliated with one of these two teams, either team 1, the prosecution, or team 11. I know we're going to have some viewers. Is there anyone who's unaffiliated with these teams in terms of either being a participant or a relative or friend or supporter? All right. The record should
And Your
reflect that
Honor,
there's-
all the observers are supposed to have their cameras, they're supposed to turn their cameras off.
Okay, so Ms. Kobe, would you please turn your camera off? I'd appreciate that. Okay.
All right, let the record reflect that I will now be sharing my screen of exhibits 1 and 5.
Go ahead.
Detective Markowitz, do you see exhibit 1?
Yes,
And do you see exhibit 5?
yes.
Do you recognize these exhibits?
Yes, these are two of the photos taken at the crime scene.
Are these photos fair and accurate representations of the victim's home?
Yes,
Are they fair and accurate representations of the victim's body as well as the murder weapon?
yes, they are.
Your Honor, the prosecution moves to admit exhibits 1 and 5 into evidence.
For the defense, response?
No objections, Your Honor.
Exhibits 1 and 5 are admitted.
We also request that these exhibits be published to the jury.
You may.
Detective Markowitz, could you go into a little bit further depth and tell the jury what you see in exhibits 1 and 5?
Of course, exhibit 1 shows the victim face down just inside the residence, as well as a Ring video camera in the top right of the photo at the front door. And exhibit 5 is the photo of the large knife used as the murder weapon in this case.
Now, you mentioned a Ring video camera in exhibit 1. Did you find any other cameras located?
Yes, there were 3 total cameras located at the front door, the side gate, and the back door.
Did you go inside the residence at any point in time?
I did. I entered through the back door.
What did you notice?
The home was in disarray. There was a partially open kitchen drawer containing several knives, as well as a knife block in the corner with an empty slot, telling me that a knife had recently been taken from this area.
Where did you investigate next in the Brackman home?
I then went to the dining area next to the kitchen.
What did you see there?
There was a chair knocked over, as well as a broken plate on the floor, indicating a struggle to me.
Did you find any blood in this area?
Yes, there were cast-off blood splatters in the dining room and near the front door.
What did you do next?
I saw the open door, as well as the knife laying on the floor, and I let the forensics team come in.
Did it appear as if anything had been taken from the Brackman home?
No, and expensive items such as a laptop and several flat-screen TVs had been left undisturbed.
What did it appear had happened?
It seemed obvious that the victim had caught someone breaking into their home and had then confronted the intruder with a large knife from the kitchen, but the defendant got control of the knife and then stabbed them.
What did you do with the victim's phone?
I downloaded the information from Brackman's phone. I obtained account data and passwords for his Ring account.
Were you able to access Ring videos from this account?
Yes.
Your Honor, permission to show the witness a copy of what has been previously marked as Exhibit 10.
As Exhibit 10?
Yes.
I don't think I have Exhibit 10. I have Exhibit 14, 1, and 5 admitted. Oh, you want to actually show the,
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, I apologize.
Mhm.
Let the record reflect, I'm going to now share my screen. Detective Markowitz, do you see Exhibit 10?
Yes.
Do you recognize this video link?
Yes, this is one of the few Ring videos that we used in our investigation.
Is this the same link you obtained from the victim's phone?
Yes.
Is this video a fair and accurate representation of the victim's home?
Yes, when I reviewed this video in my investigation, I saw that the house contained is in fact the Brackman home.
And are these fair and accurate representations of the videos you obtained and watched from the Ring camera itself?
Yes.
Your Honor, the prosecution moves to have Exhibit 10 admitted into evidence.
For the defense,
No objections, Your Honor.
Exhibit 10 is admitted.
Permission to publish to the jury.
You may.
Detective Markowitz, I'm now going to pull up the video itself. I'm going to play it for you. Could you please explain what you see to the jury?
Of course, as you can see, the evidence suggests that the suspect likely arrived at the residence to burglarize the home, however, alerted the homeowner when they failed to get in the front door, and then went around to the back to enter. They then had a struggle with the victim, who had grabbed a knife from the home, then killed Mr. Brackman and fled from the scene. The victim appeared to have interrupted a random burglary.
Now, does the individual in this video match the suspect's body type?
Yes, Avery Becker's body frame does appear to fit the frame of the individual in the video, based on an analysis of the fence height in the background.
What else did you find on the victim's phone?
I found many emails and text messages referencing mock trial.
Did you investigate the victim's mock trial activity?
I did. I was following as many leads as possible, so I reached out to the school to obtain the contacts of several student participants.
Did you speak with any students from Colorado High School?
Yes, most notably was Alex Cifuentes, who spoke about another student, Avery Becker, who reached out to them about a plan to trash Brackman's home.
Did you and Ms. Cifuentes have any further conversation?
Yes, I had Alex and her parents come to the station to conduct an interview.
Did it appear that this Avery Becker had any kind of connection to the victim?
Yes, in fact. Mrs. Becker had recently been kicked off the team for vandalizing the coach's car and had been pleading with Alex to get back on the team.
Did you further investigate Ms. Becker?
Yes, I obtained a warrant to search Avery Becker's cell phone.
Did that warrant result in anything?
No, actually. When I made arrangements to get the phone, the attorney said the phone had been lost the day before the murder.
Were you able to obtain any cell tower records from the victim's phone?
Yes, I got these with a court order for information from March 6th. They're called call detail records, or CDRs.
And what do these CDRs typically reflect?
They can tell you the date and time of communication and the specific tower with which the phone was communicating, and even the specific antenna.
What do the CDRs in this case tell you?
They reflected that another phone was sending several texts and placing several calls to Avery Becker's cell phone leading up to when the victim was killed.
Were you able to tell who this other phone belonged to?
Yes, Taylor Perkins, another student at Colorado High School.
Was it surprising to you that none of these calls or texts on Avery Becker's phone were answered?
Not at all. Considering what Avery Becker was doing at the time, going on the way to murder her coach, I wouldn't be surprised if she was a little too busy to be answering the phone.
When did Avery Becker's phone last connect to a cell tower?
Activity ceased around 13:20 hours or 1:20 p.m.
What did this make you suspect?
That the cell phone was turned off after the murder and disposed of.
Your Honor, permission to show the witness a copy of what was previously marked as Exhibit 16.
You may.
Let the record reflect I'm now going to share my screen.
You may.
Detective Markowitz, do you see Exhibit 16?
Yes.
Do you recognize this document?
Yes, this was an exhibit that I produced myself.
Do you often compile these diagrams in the line of work?
Yes, it helps to summarize all of the call detail records that I compile into an easier to understand document for juries.
Does this diagram fairly and accurately reflect the data which you collected?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, the prosecution moved to have Exhibit 16 admitted into evidence.
For the defense,
No objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit 16 is admitted.
Permission to publish to the jury.
You may.
Detective Markowitz, now that the jury can see your diagram, could you walk them through exactly what it shows?
Of course. You can see that Avery Becker received a text from Taylor Perkins at 12:47 p.m. with communication at cell tower 1227-3. Another text came at 12:55 at antenna 1191-1. Next was an incoming call at 13:05 hours, then 13:06, and lastly a text at 13:17 hours, all unanswered at antenna 1197-1, the closest tower to the Brackman home.
Based on all of this information, what did the CDR indicate?
I gathered that Becker was home around 12:45, left and drove towards the Brackman home along Rock Creek Parkway at 12:55. Then from 1:05 to 1:17 was at Coach Brackman's home.
Now, Detective Markowitz, based on all the evidence that you collected in today's case, what was your conclusion?
It's clear to me that Avery Becker went to the Brackman home on March 6th of 2020 with the intent to break in and vandalize the home in retaliation for being kicked off the team. But Brackman was actually home and alerted by the Ring camera, and then Brackman armed himself with a knife before confronting Avery Becker, who wound up struggling and taking the knife and then killing Mr. Brackman with a stab to the left shoulder.
Thank you, Detective Markowitz. No further questions at this time.
Cross-examination, please.
Hello, Detective Markowitz. When you arrived, you came to find that the victim was face down near the front entrance to the residence, correct?
Yes, as seen in Exhibit 1.
And you believe that the victim most likely had fallen to the ground while trying to leave the residence?
That was my conclusion, yes.
Now, photographs were taken of the crime scene, correct?
Yes, many.
And some of the photos of the crime scene were corrupted, and thus the jury cannot see all of the photos that had been taken of the crime scene?
There were 2 or 3 digital files that became corrupted. Unfortunately, luckily for us, it was no major photos.
Although among those missing photos were photos of the cast-off blood splatter, correct?
Yes.
And based off the crime scene, you were able to reconstruct what you believe to be the chain of events?
Yes.
You believe that the victim caught someone breaking into the home?
Yes.
And you believe that the victim confronted the intruder with a knife?
Yes, there was a drawer full of knives as well as a knife block. The drawer was open, so from that I could gather that a knife was probably taken from that drawer.
But there was no DNA evidence at the scene, correct?
Right.
There were no fingerprints at the scene?
Right.
The intruder was long gone by the time you arrived on the scene, correct?
Yes.
Moving on. The Ring cameras caught the intruder on film, correct?
Yes.
Based off the clothing and mask worn by the intruder, you could not positively identify the intruder, correct?
Not from the Ring video cameras, however, from the cell tower records, we did get a match.
Moving on. You recognized the victim, correct?
Yes, Mr. Brackman.
You knew him as a criminal defense attorney?
Yes.
And originally, based on his work as a criminal defense attorney, you consider that the intruder could have been a disgruntled ex-client.
That was one of the initial possibilities. As you know, detectives follow many leads. So that was one of my initial theories, yes.
In this case, you did identify a suspect by the name of Blair Rowlands, correct?
Yes, that was one of the few suspects at the start.
And Blair Rowlands is the child of a disgruntled ex-client, correct?
Yes.
And Blair Rowlands has also been missing since the murder.
Yes.
You also realize that the victim was a coach of the mock trial team at Colorado High School, correct?
Yes.
And the first person that you reached out to was a mock trial student named Alex Fuentes?
I reached out to many. Like I said, I obtained the team rosters and then alphabetically went through them. So I talked with every member.
Alex Fuentes alleged that Avery Becker had sent her text messages about a plan to trash the victim's home, correct?
Yes.
And you had Alex Fuentes come to the station for an interview?
Yes, I interviewed her while her parents were present.
But Alex didn't bring her phone, did she?
No.
And you were surprised that after your conversation that Alex Fuentes did not bring her phone, since it was the only time that you have encountered a teenager who did not have their cell phone with them?
It was kind of funny, but I can understand the pressure talking with detectives.
And after your meeting, you only required screenshots of the text messages, correct?
Yes.
You did not require Alex Fuentes to bring you the cell phone?
No, I figured it would show me the same thing.
You then proceeded to conduct no further investigation of those text messages.
I didn't see the need. Of course, we have the technology to do so. However, these texts, they showed me a possible motive. So that led me to pursue my investigation into Avery Becker. And that's where we found most of our evidence.
And speaking of that extra technology that you have, if you had the cell phone, you could have used the Cellubrite system to authenticate those text messages, couldn't you have?
Yes.
And you had the experience to do that, correct?
Of course.
You are aware that a person can tamper with iPhone screenshots.
Yes, that is a possibility, but like I said, it showed me the possible motive and led me to further my investigation.
So as someone who has specialized training with cell phones, you still never considered further investigating those texts, even though they so-called gave you your biggest break in the case?
There was no need.
And after what you deemed as the biggest break in the case, you took no action to further investigate any other suspects, correct?
I pursued my investigation into Avery Becker, and like I said, that's where I found all of our evidence pointing to who did it.
Moving on, you were informed that Avery Becker lost her phone on March 5th, 2020, correct?
I'm aware that's what she says.
Yet, when you obtained a court order to obtain the account records for her phone, you only obtained the records for the March 6th, 2020, the day of the murder, correct?
Right.
So you had the ability to track where Avery Becker's phone had been on the day that it went missing, and you failed to investigate it?
There was no need to look at it the day before, just the day of the murder.
Has her phone been located since the murder?
No.
Now, you obtained CDRs or call detail records, correct?
Yes.
And those records can identify the cell tower with which the cell phone was communicating, but it does not give you GPS coordinates of the phone, correct?
No, but considering how many antennas we have nowadays, it's very precise.
And isn't it true that not all phones connect to the tower located closest to it?
Almost all of the time they do, so it can give us a very, very good understanding.
Thus, though, Avery Becker's phone could have connected to a tower that was further away than the tower it was closest to.
But it did not.
Through the records that you obtained, you were also able to tell that on the day of the murder that Avery Becker's phone received phone calls and text messages, correct?
Yes.
But you were also able to determine that Avery Becker's phone did not answer the calls or respond to the text messages it received.
Yes, I assume she didn't want to answer on the way to trash Brackman's home and then murder him.
Meaning that there was most likely, so isn't it possible that on March 6th, Taylor Perkins and Avery Becker could have been trying to get a hold of Becker's lost phone?
I don't see that as the possibility, considering Avery was on the way to Mr. Brackman's home.
And lastly, the CDR records do not contain the content of a call or text message, correct?
Right, that is correct.
So the only evidence that you have to suggest that Avery Becker was near the victim's house on the day of the murder is based on the CDR data, correct?
Yes, and like I said, it's very accurate.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Detective Markowitz, what were the photos of that were lost as a part of the investigation?
It was simply photos of the blood spatter that would have really contributed not much more to the case.
Is there a reason you didn't find any fingerprints at the crime scene?
Yes, the intruder was wearing gloves along with the rest of their outfit.
Did you feel the need to validate the screenshots by obtaining Ms. Fuentes' phone?
No, like I said, they simply showed me a possible motive that then led me to pursue my investigation into Avery Becker.
Did it seem likely a teenager had the ability to somehow alter these text messages or forge them in any way?
No, I didn't see that as likely.
Now, were the CDRs a reliable piece of evidence for you in this case?
Very much so.
Are they typically a reliable piece of evidence in most of the cases you investigate?
Yes, like I said before, I use them all the time, and they're very helpful in our investigations.
Did you have any reason to investigate the location of Avery Becker on March 5th, the day prior?
No, we were simply interested in the day of the murder.
Thank you. No further questions.
All right. Next witness, please.
The prosecution calls Kyle Cusack to the stand.
All right. I'm going to go down to a sitting position here, folks.
May I proceed?
You may. And Mr. Cusack, I'm going to remind you, you are under oath. Please proceed, Ms. Ross.
Good afternoon. Could you please state your name and spell your last name for the record?
Hi there. My name is Kyle Cusack, and Cusack is K-U-Z-A-K.
What is your profession, Mr. Cusack?
I'm a Colorado Bureau of Investigation certified crime scene reconstruction investigator, but that you can call me a CSR for short.
How long have you worked as a CSR?
At this point, I've had about 19 years of experience.
Can you please give a brief description of what this title entails?
Sure thing. So basically, I investigate complex crime scenes. I focus on the how of the crime. And I do this through the collection, analysis, and organization of data that I find.
And what kinds of crime scenes do you have experience investigating?
Multitude. I've done armed robberies, home invasions, fatal accidents, homicides. In other words, I get around.
So a few questions ago, you mentioned that your work as a CSR is guided by standard principles. What are some of these principles that you follow in your work?
Well, I tend to stick to a 5-step process, which consists of the recognition and documentation of a crime scene, the collection of present evidence, the evaluation of said evidence, the formulation of hypotheses based off that evidence, and finally, the formulation of the chronology of the crime.
So what is your main purpose of your CSR work?
As I said before, my duty is to organize the chronology of the crime. And to do so, I employ what's known as a linear sequential unmasking process, which takes all bias out of the case.
Do you follow any methodologies when conducting your analysis?
I do. In particular, I followed Tom Bevel and Ross Gardner's 7-step methodology for event analysis.
Your Honor, at this time, I move to admit Kyle Cusack as an expert in crime scene reconstruction and investigation pursuant to Rule 702.
For the defense, please.
Yes, Your Honor. Can we please conduct a brief voir dire?
You may.
You're not a police officer, Mr. Cusack?
No, I'm a civilian employee. Basically, I work in tandem with the police, but don't get quite as nice of a title.
So you're a civilian employee?
Yes, ma'am.
And you've only spent 3 years as an employee of the Denver Police Department?
Yes, but 16 years with other law enforcement agencies.
And you provided no information about your education?
No, I'm sorry about that, but I can tell you that I cannot do the work that I do, let alone for nearly 2 decades, without the proper education, certification, and experience I've had.
You haven't provided any information about your training or certification, though, also, right?
I do not know that I need that for this case. No, I didn't.
Do you have any past experiences testifying as an expert?
In a court of law?
Yes.
No, it's not, but not to worry because my job is actually focused around making the convoluted clear. So there's no need to worry about my performance today.
At this time, Your Honor, we object to the admission of Mr. Kyle Cusack as an expert since the prosecution has failed to introduce evidence of Mr. Cusack's expertise.
A response?
Yes, Your Honor. We were not provided with any kind of certification or education in the witness statement by Mr. Cusack, but it is clear based off of his years of experience and where he is at this point in his career that he did have the proper training and education to get thus far.
The objection is overruled. The court will accept Mr. Kuzak as an expert in crime scene investigation
And reconstruction, Your
and
Honor.
reconstruction. Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Kuzak, can you briefly walk the jury through how you analyzed and reconstructed the murder of Mackenzie Brackman?
Of course, whenever I arrive at a crime scene, I immediately assume that every case in which I'm involved is going to trial. So I collect, analyze, interrelate all found evidence in order to create a clear and concise chronology of events. In this particular case, I started by creating a witness tracking spreadsheet, an evidence tracking spreadsheet, and a rudimentary flowchart in order to organize a timeline.
How exactly do you use these charts and spreadsheets that you mentioned to conduct your investigation?
Well, these resources are quite invaluable in my line of work due to the fact that by interrelating all these evidence, you can gain a great understanding of how the crime occurred. In other words, they really help an outside observer understand what happened in this crime.
What were your final steps in the conduction of your analysis?
Well, step 4 happens to be the formulation of hypotheses, which is later followed by peer review, and finally the publishing of my final conclusion.
What particular evidence did you review as you rebuilt and reviewed this case?
Well, other than the victim's body and the surrounding evidence, such as blood splatter, we located a couple interesting pieces of evidence elsewhere in the house, such as scuff marks on the kitchen floor, a broken dish at the base of the kitchen table, a knife drawer that was left ajar, and a knife block with a missing large chef's knife, like the one found in the victim, Mr. Brackman.
So based off of your investigation and all of the evidence that you analyzed, what was the sequence of events of March 6, 2020?
Well, it seems that, according to the Ring security videos, the culprit approached Mr. Brackman's front door, thereby getting his attention. Later, the culprit walked around the back of the house and entered through a rear sliding door. However, Brackman, alerted to the culprit's presence, decided to look for a weapon of self-defense, which he found in a large chef's knife in his kitchen. Eventually, the culprit entered the victim's home and the two engaged in a scuffle. We can conclude that the scuffle moved to the front of the house due to the broken dish at the base of the kitchen table. And in the end, Mr. Brackman was disarmed. Throughout the struggle, the victim obtained the knife and lodged it right in his scapula, which is just a fancy SAT word for shoulder blade, thereby nicking the aorta and causing him to die from bleeding out.
Has anyone else refuted the conclusions that you came to based off of your analysis?
Yes, there was one Blake Van Owen who believes that Mr. Brackman was stabbed while he was sitting at his kitchen table by a culprit who was standing directly above him.
Why do you disagree with this conclusion?
It's not that I disagree, it's that the evidence itself does. There's a couple flaws in this theory, so let's go through them step by step. First of all, this requires that Brackman was not alerted to the victim's presence, which would be highly unlikely due to the fact that the Ring security systems was connected directly to his phone. Additionally, Brackman would have likely heard the sliding back door open and the culprit shuffling through the kitchen. Furthermore, it's very interesting how Brackman was stabbed based on this theory, due to the fact that the knife must have been held upside down, which in my nearly 2 decades of experience is about as impractical of a manner to kill somebody. And finally, as we said before, this theory does not account for a myriad of evidence, such as the broken dish, nor the scuff marks on the floor, nor the missing knife from the knife block.
So, despite any problems that you may have faced with this investigation, do you feel confident in your conclusion?
I do. I feel quite confident, yes.
So, can you briefly summarize in a sentence what happened on March 6th of 2020?
To be frank, this was a mere burglary gone wrong. There's no evidence of malintent. It just seems as though the culprit was surprised by the victim being home, and as a result, Mr. Brackman lost his life.
Thank you, Mr. Cusack. No further questions at this time.
Cross-examination, please.
Yes, Your Honor. May I begin?
You may.
You did not arrive on the crime scene of the homicide until after it was processed by other members, right?
No, I arrived at 444 South Flower Street after it was already secured by Detective Corolla, I believe.
And you relied on photographs of the crime scene that were lost or corrupted?
Relied on is an interesting way of phrasing. Yes, I did analyze them. However, they were lost well after my review, so it had little or no effect on my conclusions.
So important evidence has been lost by the prosecution?
I suppose, yeah, due to technological errors, yes.
In crime scene reconstruction, your analysis of evidence creates more questions, right?
Yeah, my main work is to explore all potential alternatives.
And then more analysis in a quest for the best explanation of what happened.
Yes, and we reached that conclusion that Avery Becker was the most likely culprit.
Okay, moving on. Can you identify the race or the gender of the person in the ring videos?
We cannot. All we can identify is the victim's height and build, which we were able to do so by cross-referencing the video with the actual height of the fence outside Mr. Brackman's property, and it matched that of Avery Becker.
And also your case relied on the defendant matching the general height and build of the person in the ring videos?
Yes, ma'am.
And this height and build is common?
Common? I suppose, yeah. Everyone comes in different shapes and sizes.
Did you recover any fingerprints belonging to my client at the scene of the crime?
No, the only genetic evidence that we obtained was that of the victim, Mr. Brackman. However, Ms. Wampler, we must not fall victim to what's known as the CSR effect, which is the misconception that only genetic evidence present at a crime scene is an indicator of one's guilt.
Okay, moving on. You assume that the knife used to stab the victim was taken from the knife block on the counter, right?
Yes, due to the fact that it matches the little slot in which it would slide into.
And your theory is that the victim looked for a defensive weapon and took the larger chef's knife from the knife block?
Yes, due to being alerted of the culprit's presence. Excuse me.
Yet the brand of knife used to kill the victim is a Chicago cutlery, and the knife block contained a different brand of knives, J.A. Henkel's.
Yeah, but this is likely due to the fact that knives, upon continuous usage, can either be broken or damaged.
Moving on, you believe that a high school girl stabbed a grown man through a layer of bone. You believe that she was strong enough to do this?
Yes, ma'am, 100%.
Okay, moving on. Isn't it true that you're unable to recreate all event segments?
Yes, but this is common in my line of work. What we were able to do was analyze potential alternatives and determine that this was the most likely conclusion for the case.
Isn't it true that you were unable to place all evidence?
Yes, but again, this is not uncommon in my field of work.
Isn't it also true that you wanted more physical evidence on the scene of the crime?
Yeah, I mean, in all honesty, you can never have too much evidence, but I believe the amount that we collected was sufficient enough to reach the proper conclusion.
Moving on, during this investigation, you identified a number of possible subjects or suspects, right?
That's correct. Yes, ma'am.
You identified Alex Cifuentes
Yes, we did.
and Blair Rowlands.
Correct.
Are you aware that Alex and Blair knew each other?
Yes, I was aware they had some sort of relationship with one another. It seemed like they were comrades or fellow students.
The victim, Mackenzie Brackman, defended Blair Rowlands' father, Jonathan Rowlands, in a criminal case in which Blair Rowlands' father ended up going to jail. Do you know about this?
Yes, but not a whole lot of detail. I know the basics, if that's what you're asking.
Do you know that the police were never able to locate Blair Rowlands after the crime?
Yes, I do.
You're also aware of Avery Becker's alibi.
Sorry, is that a question or a statement, Ms. Wampler?
You're also aware of Avery Becker's alibi, right?
Yes, I am.
And you're also aware that Taylor Perkins corroborated Avery Becker's alibi on the day
Yes.
of the...
Yes, however, that evidence has potential fallibility, but we must acknowledge that the potential fallibility of evidence does not diminish the need to consider it, such as I said in my affidavit.
Okay, you are also aware that Ms. Becker expressed remorse for her past actions?
Yes, that is true.
Do you have any evidence pointing directly to Ms. Becker on the scene of the crime?
Besides the matching height and build, we have no genetic evidence. But again, as I mentioned, we can't fall victim to the CSI effect.
I have no further questions at this time, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, any redirect, Ms. Ross?
Yes, Your Honor, just very briefly. Mr. Kuzak, do you still feel as though you had sufficient evidence to make a confident conclusion in this investigation?
I do. I believe that the evidence that we collected sufficiently proves that Avery Becker was the one who committed the crime.
No further questions, Your Honor. The prosecution rests.
All right. With that, then, we will turn to the defense. Does the defense wish to call their first witness, please?
Yes, we'd like to call Professor Blake Van Owen to the stand.
Mr. Van Owen, I'm going to remind you that you're still under oath, sir.
Hello, Professor Van Owen. Could you please state your full name for the record?
I'm Professor Blake Van Owen. That's spelled Van-Owen.
What is your education?
I have obtained a master's degree in criminal justice from the Ashford University online program.
And what is your employment history?
I started my career with the Aurora Police Department and became a school resource officer. And then I worked as a private investigator and started my teaching courses on police procedures as an adjunct faculty member at Community College of the Rockies.
And what work are you currently doing?
For the past 5 years now, I've been teaching a course at CU Denver on police practices and social justice, and I avail myself regularly as an expert courtroom witness in the areas of police practices, crime scene reconstruction, cell tower analysis, and general police investigation tactics.
Have you been accepted as a defense expert in any courts?
Yes, I've been accepted as a defense expert in the U.S. District Court for the districts of Colorado, Kansas, and Arizona, as well as state courts in Colorado, Wyoming, Nebraska, and New Mexico.
And finally, are you being paid for your testimony today as an expert?
I am.
Your Honor, at this time, I move to have Blake Van Owen designated as an expert in the field of police practices, crime scene reconstruction, and cell tower analysis pursuant to Rule 702.
And the last thing is cell tower, what again, Ms. Cruiser?
Cell tower analysis.
All right. For the prosecution
Permission to
response,
conduct a brief order.
you may, Mr. Cruiser.
Now, Professor Van Owen, you're currently a professor of a course at CU Denver, correct?
I am.
But you are not currently a police investigator?
No, I'm a private investigator.
In all of your work as an expert witness, you've only ever testified on behalf of the defense, is that correct?
That is correct, because the prosecution uses their own personnel to testify.
So not once have you ever prosecuted or helped in the prosecution of a defendant?
I have not.
You've only ever testified as an expert in crime scene investigation 8 times, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you've only ever testified on cell tower analysis 5 times?
That's correct.
You don't have any certifications in the field of cell tower analysis, is that correct?
That is correct.
Nor any certifications in crime scene reconstruction?
That is also correct.
Your Honor, the prosecution does not argue that this witness does not exemplify the traits of an expert. However, we do object to the admission of this witness as an expert in the field of cell tower analysis due to their lack of education or proven training in this field. However, we do not object on the other grounds.
All right, so the prosecution doesn't object on police practices or a crime scene investigation, but on cell tower analysis.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, Ms. Cruiser, does the defense care to respond?
Yes, Your Honor. I think it's been shown and said by Blake Van Owen that he has had work with cell tower analysis and that he has worked on it in prior cases.
Right, the court sustains the objection for the time being as to the acceptance of Mr. Van Owen in the area of cell tower analysis. I'm going to allow you to lay some additional foundation. The court will accept Mr. Van Owen as an expert in the area of police practices, as well as crime scene investigation. Ms. Cruiser, do you care to lay any further foundation with regard to the cell tower analysis?
No, Your Honor.
All right, proceed then. It'll be just those 2 areas that the court acknowledges and accepts Mr. Van Owen then.
Okay. Now moving into the current case, were you hired to investigate the death of Mackenzie Brackman?
Yes, I was.
And what did you review in your investigation of the case?
I reviewed the police reports, the crime scene reconstruction conducted by Kyle Cusack, as well as the cell tower reports and the exhibits prepared by Detective Markowitz.
Mr. Van Owen, can you please get closer to your microphone, if you would? Thank you.
Yes. I also conducted my own investigation in areas that I felt were neglected by the police in this case.
What conclusions did you reach about the investigation?
This police investigation was rushed. When you rush, you miss things. This group missed a lot of important things.
Let's talk about the things that were missed. What is the first thing that you noticed?
The police came to an easy conclusion, and the problem with going for the easy is that it leads to a significant doubt as to who committed this crime. The kind of doubt that should have caused the prosecutors to go back to the drawing board instead of impaneling a jury.
Are there any conclusions reached by the prosecution that you agree with?
Yes, all of us agree that physical on-scene evidence points to an intruder who broke into the house of the victim. However, this is about all we agree on.
Which findings of Investigator Kuzak do you disagree with?
I do not disagree with Investigator Kuzak's conclusion that the intruder was surprised by the victim and that that during the struggle, that the victim was stabbed with the same knife he'd retrieved from the knife block in the kitchen.
And why do you disagree with this conclusion?
It started with the crime scene itself. There are scuff marks of some kind on the floor near the door, but we have no idea when they were made. They could have been made a year before the incident.
Now, what about the knife that Investigator Kuzak claims came from the knife block?
Again, looking at the details of the crime scene photos, one can tell that the murder weapon was not just another brand. It was clearly inconsistent with the style and blade dimensions of the otherwise orderly and same set of knives that were there. Kuzak made the most simplistic assumption available from the observations. The murder weapon is a knife, and the knife block was missing a knife, so it must have been the knife missing from the knife block.
Do you agree with Investigator Kuzak's conclusions regarding how the victim was killed?
No. Kuzak believes that based on the knife's position, the intruder was in front of Brackman, and they were both struggling for possession of the knife. Based on the size of the intruder and the make and model of the knife, it makes a lot more sense for the intruder to have been located behind Brackman, who was seated so as to be able to stab the victim in a downward angle and nick his aorta.
Another important detail involving the location and attack of the murder for the prosecution was the Ring doorbell cameras. Do you agree that the victim was alerted to the intruder by his Ring app?
Again, the old assumptions horse has reared its head. We will never know whether the notifications for the Ring app were turned on or off because Detective Markowitz didn't bother to obtain the user account records.
Now, during your investigation, what did you learn about Avery Becker's phone?
There's evidence that Avery Becker lost the phone the day before the murder. Taylor Perkins also confirms that Miss Becker did not have her phone on the day of the murder.
Were there any other shortcomings in this investigation?
Yes. The police managed to lose pictures of the blood drops in the hallway and pictures of apparent cast-off marks on the wall near the front door.
Now, did you find that Miss Becker had an alibi for the day of the murder?
Yes. Taylor Perkins confirms that Miss Becker was with Perkins during the time of the break-in and murder were most likely to have occurred. In fact, Miss Becker and Perkins were actively looking for the lost phone at the time of the murder.
Did you find evidence that corroborates this alibi?
Yes. Taylor Perkins claims that they were attempting to locate Miss Becker's phone by sending text messages and calling it. The cell tower information establishes that the messages were relayed by antenna 2 to Miss Becker's
Objection,
phone.
Your Honor, beyond the scope of the witness's expertise.
Ms. Cruiser,
We can move on from the question.
objection sustained.
Now, finally, Professor Van Owen, did your investigation lead you to any other possible suspects?
Yes, Blair Rollins. He was another student at Colorado High who I suspect may have been another suspect in this case.
And why was Rollins a possible suspect, in your opinion, Professor Van Owen?
Well, Brackman was the reason why Blair's dad ended up in jail. Brackman was Jonathan Rowland's attorney in a case in the past, a case where Jonathan ended up pleading guilty and ended up in jail.
Your Honor, may I show the witness what was previously marked as Exhibit 22?
You may.
Professor Van Owen, can you identify this video link?
Yes, I believe that is a link to the audio recording from the trial of Jonathan Rawlins.
And is this a fair and accurate representation of the link?
It is.
At this time, I move for the admission of Exhibit 22 into evidence.
For the prosecution?
Your Honor, the prosecution objects to the admission of this exhibit on the grounds that it is both including hearsay as well as being more prejudicial than probative.
Ms. Cruiser? You may.
In condolences to hearsay, it should be allowed in under an exception to hearsay rule 8032 for an excited utterance.
The court overrules the objection as to hearsay. What about the 403 objection as to more prejudicial than probative?
I have no response to that objection.
Right. Understanding there's no response, the court will still permit the admission of Exhibit 22.
Your Honor, may I have permission to publish this video and link to the jury?
You may.
I'll get you back, Brackman, if it's the last thing I do.
Now, Professor Van Owen, what does this audio recording show you?
Well, it shows a pretty clear motive as to why Blair Rawlins might be inclined to kill Brackman, since Brackman.
Your Honor, this witness is speculating beyond the scope of their expertise. And please proceed.
Speculation is the objection, Ms. Cruiser. Your response?
I think due to this witness's expertise in crime scene investigation and police practices, I think that he has the ability to give his speculation and his expert opinion in this field.
Well, the court overrules the objection based on Ms. Cruiser's explanation, with the exception of speculation. The objection is speculation. I'm not going to allow the witness to speculate, but if he has personal knowledge and he can answer the question, he may do so, but he may not speculate. Do you understand, Professor?
I do.
Good. Answer the question, please.
This recording shows that Rawlins is not happy with his dad being put away in jail.
And based off your investigation, do you believe that Avery Becker murdered Mackenzie Brackman?
No, I do not. There are too many holes in the prosecution's case. This was an atrocious investigation led by incompetent investigators who allowed their assumptions to cloud their judgment in accusing Miss Becker of murder. Miss Becker had an alibi and had apologized for her previous actions.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Professor, you sit here today to tell us of all the flaws in the prosecution's investigative work. Is that correct?
It is.
But according to you, you yourself were not a perfect police investigator. Is that true?
No, no one's a perfect investigator.
In fact, you even left the Aurora Police Department following an incident of use of force?
Yes, I did.
You've chosen to make a new living out of exposing the mistakes of other investigators. Is that correct?
It is.
Mistakes which you yourself were once guilty of?
Yes.
It's true that you prefer to be called professor. Is that correct?
It is.
But not referred to as detective nor investigator?
No, because I worked hard for the title of professor.
It's also true that you refer to yourself as a check on the power of police?
I do refer to myself as that, yes.
Now I'd like to move on to your pay for today's testimony. It's true that you're charging $450 an hour for your testimony and deposition in this case. Is that correct?
It is.
You make a pretty decent living in this line of work?
I do.
You've even charged up to $10,000 a case, is that correct?
Yes, sometimes.
Now, I'd like to reiterate, you've only ever testified as a defense expert, is that correct?
That is.
And in this case, you claim to have conducted a partial investigation. Is this true?
Yes, I conducted my investigation where I felt the prosecution missed things.
However, you yourself did not conduct a complete investigation?
I did not.
Do you sit here today to criticize the prosecution's lack of a complete investigation?
Yes.
Yet you chose not to complete one yourself?
No, it's not my job to complete a.
Now, I'd like to move on again. It's true that you've met Mr. Kyle Kuzak before, is this correct? I apologize, I couldn't hear the response.
Mr.
Okay, I'm back. Could you repeat the question?
Yes, no problem. You've yourself met Mr. Kyle Kuzak before, is that correct?
That is correct.
You believe he's a little egotistical?
I do, yes.
Or maybe even a little bit full of himself?
Objection, relevance.
Response, Mr. Cruiser?
I believe all of these comments and words and interactions with Kyle Kuzak go towards the potential bias of Professor Van Owen to testify in today's case.
Objection overruled. This is cross-examination. Mr. or Professor, would you please get closer to your microphone? Go ahead,
Yes.
Mr. Cruiser.
You claim Kyle Kuzak's a little bit full of himself?
Yes, I do.
I'd like to transition now to the crime scene. You claim that on-scene evidence points to an intruder that broke into the residence. Is this correct?
Yes, I do agree with that.
In fact, much of the evidence presented in today's case was found at the scene of the crime. Is that true?
Yes, it is.
A crime scene which you yourself never stepped foot in?
I did not.
So the evidence that made up much of your investigation was evidence you've never actually had your hands on. Is this correct?
That's true.
Now, you claim that Detective Markowitz failed in the sense that he failed to obtain complete records of the victim's ring account. Is this correct?
It is.
However, as an investigator, you too failed to obtain a full report of the ring account?
Yes, I could have obtained it, but I did not.
This full report would have indicated whether or not the victim's phone notifications were on. Is that correct?
It is.
Notifications that would have alerted the victim to an individual roaming outside of their home?
Well, we don't know if he would have paid attention to those notifications, but it would have showed up on his phone.
You claim Detective Markowitz failed to obtain cell tower records for Taylor Perkins. Is that correct?
That is.
And while you admit you too should have, you also failed to obtain these records. Is this true?
Yes, it is.
Now, you agree that cell tower records indicate Avery Becker's phone was indeed near the Brackman home at the time of the murder. Is that correct?
That is, but that's not to say that Avery Becker herself was near the victim's house.
You failed to obtain Avery Becker's records to validate her whereabouts from the day prior to the murder. Is that correct?
That is.
And you failed to obtain Taylor Perkins' records from the day before?
It is. I did.
You didn't investigate the mall or restaurant where the supposed alibi of Taylor Perkins and Miss Becker occurred, did you?
Could you rephrase that question?
You did not investigate the mall or restaurant where Miss Perkins and Avery Becker claimed to be on March 6th?
I did not know.
I'd like to move on to the accusation that you have made in this case. You have investigated someone of your own, is that correct?
It is.
And that person is Blair Rollins?
Yes.
On direct examination, you discussed the supposed motives of Blair to commit this crime?
Yes, it did.
And you think Blair Rollins may have been seeking revenge for her father's sentencing under the representation of Avery Mackenzie Brackman, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
However, you didn't bring with you today any evidence of this, is that correct?
No, I did not.
Nor is Blair Rollins sitting in this courtroom with us today?
No, that's because we could not find him. He is fallen off the grid.
So you've chosen to implicate Blair Rollins with your testimony today without Blair Rollins being here to speak for himself, is that correct?
That is.
No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Professor Blake Van Owen, on average, how many cases do you work on per year?
I work on maybe about 10 per year.
Thus, do you consider your fees to be excessive?
I do not.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Next witness, please.
The defense calls Taylor Perkins to the stand.
All right, Mr. Perkins, I'll remind you, you're under oath, or Miss Perkins, you're under oath. Sorry. Go ahead.
Please state your full name and spell your last name for the jury.
Taylor Perkins, Perkins.
Where did you go to high school?
Colorado High School.
Were you on the mock trial team?
Yeah, I was with my best friend Avery Becker.
How did you view Coach Brackman?
I didn't think he made the best decisions for the team, to be completely honest.
Did Coach Brackman and Avery get along?
Not really.
Objection, speculation.
Response, Mr. Kirschner?
It's the witness's observation, Your Honor.
Objection overruled. Answer the question, please.
Did Coach Brackman and Avery get along?
From my perspective, it really seemed like they didn't. You know, Coach always was on Avery about something.
And Ms. Fisher, would you get closer to your microphone, please, so we can hear you? Thank you.
Yes,
Go ahead, Mr. Kirschner.
Did the coach give Avery a hard time?
yes, it did seem like that. He was always on her about something.
What happened during the mock trial season last year?
Well, Avery ended up coming to a practice really unprepared, and so Coach got mad at her and kicked her down to the B team, which was totally ridiculous because Avery, you know, had all of the experience and awards to prove that she did deserve to be on the A team.
Did you do anything when Avery was demoted to the B team?
I ended up, you know, quitting mock trial because it wasn't something that I was that passionate about, especially without my best friend on the team.
Did Brackman put Avery back on the A team?
Yeah, and I was right to do what I did.
Did any major event happen to Avery at the regional tournament?
Yeah, Avery ended up winning Best Closing Argument and Best Attorney awards.
Did things get cleared up between Brackman and Avery after that?
No, not really. Coach actually told Avery that she didn't deserve the awards.
What then did Avery do?
Avery ended up writing Worst Attorney Award on Coach Brackman's car.
What happened next?
She tried apologizing for it, but Brackman wasn't really having any of that.
Did Avery make
And
any
ended up
effort to get back on the team?
getting out off the team. Yeah. Sorry, could you repeat that?
Did Avery make any effort to get back on the team?
Yeah, she tried apologizing, but again, Brackman wasn't letting her.
Why did it seem like Brackman wouldn't let Avery back on the team?
It really just seemed like Brackman, you know, wanted things done a certain way, and because Avery, you know, preferred an improvisation style, they really just didn't get along in that sense.
Did Avery get along with everyone else on the team?
Pretty much besides Alex, you know, Alex wanted all the different roles that Avery
Objection,
had.
speculation.
Response, please.
Witness's observation, Your Honor.
Objection overruled. Answer the question, please.
Alex really wanted all the different roles that Avery had, so it, you know, kind of created a feud between the two of them.
Did the other team members help Avery get back on the team?
Yeah, they offered to, you know, text and, you know, talk to Coach Brackman about it.
Did Avery make any other effort to get back on the team?
Your Honor, I believe she's frozen.
All right, let's take a time out until we can get Ms. Fisher's feedback.
Can you hear me now, or?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Sorry, I did not hear the last question.
Okay.
Resume the time and repeat the last question, Mr. Decker, please. I mean, Mr. Kirschner.
Did Avery make any other effort to get back on the team?
Stop the clock, please. Ms. Fisher, I think you've got a weak feed right now. I don't know if you can reposition yourself. Why don't you try speaking?
Can you hear me now? Sorry.
We can hear you. We're not seeing you move. Your image is frozen.
Okay.
There you go. I think we're seeing you. But I need you to get close to your microphone though too. Mr. Kirshner, go ahead.
Did Avery make any other effort to get back on the team?
Yes, Avery ended up going to practice and trying to apologize, but Brackman wouldn't let her.
Did you guys go anywhere after?
We ended up going back to my house after that.
What did you two do after hanging out at your house?
We went to the Fry Shack.
Did anyone show up at the Fry Shack?
Yeah, we saw some of the mock trial team members there.
When the club participants arrived, how did they treat Avery?
You know, they all seemed really sincere and were just telling Avery how bad it was for Brackman to, you know, not have her on the team anymore.
Did you go anywhere after the Fry Shack?
We ended up going to the mall.
All right, let's talk about Avery's phone. Are you aware that Avery had lost her phone?
Yes.
Objection. Lack of personal knowledge.
Mr. Kirshner?
The witness stated in her testimony that she does know that that Avery lost her phone.
The objections overruled. The witness may answer if you know. Otherwise, more foundation, Mr. Kirshner.
Are you aware that Avery had lost her phone?
Yes.
Where did Avery lose her phone?
The last place I personally saw it was at the Fry Shack.
When did you become aware that her phone was lost?
The next day we usually met up to, you know, go and to school together, and I'd been texting her and calling her, but she didn't respond. And so eventually when we did meet up, we both realized that the reason she hadn't was because she didn't have her phone on her.
The day before, was anyone sitting at the table where Avery had left her phone besides you?
Alex was.
When did you and Avery realize that her phone was missing? Or what did you and Avery do when you realized that the phone was missing?
We ended up ditching school and going around to try to find the phone.
Where did you go?
We went to the Fry Shack and all of the stores that we had visited the previous day.
Did you do anything else to locate the phone?
We tried texting and calling.
Did you see anyone you knew at the Fry Shack when you had gone there in the afternoon?
Time. I think Ms. Fisher's frozen again.
Sorry.
Okay.
Would you like me to repeat the question?
Hold on, we're not hearing her. Just a minute.
Can you hear me now or?
Yeah, we can hear you, but very faintly. I need you to get really closer or somehow turn up your volume if you can.
Is that better?
Yes. Time back in. Go ahead, Mr. Kirshner.
Did you see anyone you knew at the Fry Shack?
Could you repeat that question, please?
Did you see anyone you knew at the Fry Shack?
We did see some of the mock trial members at the Fry Shack.
Were you surprised to see them?
Yeah, because they usually would have mock trial during that time.
At the time of Brackman's murder, were you with anyone?
I was with Avery.
Where was your phone the day of the murder?
It was on me as we went around.
Were you aware of any other potential suspects?
I was eventually made aware of Blair Rollins.
Do you know Blair Rollins?
Just, you know, from passing at school.
Do you know where Blair Rollins was the day of the murder?
I was not made aware of that, no.
Did Alex and Blair know each other?
It seemed like they did.
And why would that, did they appear to be friends?
It also seemed like they appeared to be friends.
And why would that be?
It just seemed like the whole opposites track thing.
Did Brackman have any history with Blair?
I do know that Blair's father got sent to prison on the case that Brackman worked.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination, please.
Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Perkins, is it true that Coach Brackman was always giving Avery a hard time?
Yeah, it seemed like he was always on Avery about something.
You would say that the feud between the two really bothered Avery.
Avery got upset like any person would be, when you're constantly being put down by someone.
And Avery could be rash at times, yes?
Avery could be rash like any other person. Definitely wasn't irrational all the time.
This was Avery's senior year,
Yes.
and mock trial meant a lot to Avery.
Yeah, for sure. She put in 4 years of effort to it.
You observed that Avery was angry about being demoted to the B team.
Avery was definitely frustrated. Again, she put in 4 years of work just to be demoted over one incident.
Now, you mentioned this practice where everything blew up. At this practice, it's true that Avery vandalized Coach Brackman's Porsche.
Yes, that's true.
And the reason behind this was because Avery wanted to freak Coach Brackman out.
Avery got frustrated, and I'm not trying to justify what Avery did. Definitely should have been punished, but not as much as Avery was. She did put in the work, but
Thank you.
just be kicked
But
off the team. That was
you
really
observed that Avery wanted to freak Coach Brackman out. That's a yes, correct?
Yes, Avery seemed a bit upset about what had happened.
And you aren't actually sure whether or not Avery left her phone on the table.
No, but that's definitely the last place I remember it. Plus, it was really weird for, Avery to, not have her phone on her.
But you can't be sure. You mentioned that Alex talked to you about Coach Brackman's unfairness.
Could you repeat that?
You mentioned in your statement that Alex Cifuentes wanted to talk to you about Coach Brackman's unfairness, yes?
Yes.
But you didn't think Alex was being sincere.
They always had a rivalry between Alex and Avery.
Have you ever wanted to harm Alex?
I got frustrated at Alex sometimes just for being really insincere about what had happened.
You wanted to punch Alex in the face?
I was really frustrated at the time, and I didn't really want to punch him. I was just frustrated like any other person would be when your best friend is being attacked by someone.
So both you and Avery were absent from school on the day of the murder?
Yeah, we went around looking for her phone.
And there was no one else to corroborate where both of you were?
We did go and to all of the stores, and we did have our phone on us.
So I'm going to switch the focus to the iPhone now. You spent the whole day searching for Avery's supposedly lost iPhone.
Yes.
And you forgot that you can easily use the iCloud website to track an iPhone?
Yeah, I have an Android, and we were all just kind of in a crazed state of mind. As a teenager, I know my phone's important to me, and Avery's was like a third kidney.
Thank you. And now I want to discuss, you talked to Avery again, and only after talking to Avery, the suspect, did you find out that Blair Rollins was involved with the murder.
Yes.
You never in a million years would have guessed that Blair Rollins had anything to do with this case.
It's really surreal to think that someone you known even in passing would murder someone that you actually had as a coach.
But Avery, the suspect in this case, is the one that told you that Blair Rollins might have been involved.
Well, it wasn't the entire thing that made me think that. Blair Rollins definitely exhibited some behavior that made me think that before.
Thank you. It is true that Coach Brackman was defending Blair Rollins' father in this case?
Yes.
So would you say that Coach Brackman did Blair Rollins' family a huge favor?
I mean, I don't really know what transpired between all of that. All I've heard was the outcome of the case and how angry Blair Rowlands was about that.
You don't have any evidence suggesting that Alex Cifuentes faked text messages, correct?
I only know what I've learned about it.
And you have zero evidence that Alex Cifuentes had Avery's phone?
Yeah, I mean, they could have though. They didn't. They definitely had a time to actually grab it. I mean, they were by me the entire time at the table.
But you still admit that Alex Cifuentes giving Blair Avery's iPhone sounds like a stretch, correct?
Could you repeat that?
You nonetheless admit that Alex Cifuentes giving Blair Rowlands Avery's iPhone sounds like a bit of a stretch, correct?
I mean, a little. Did seem like friends though, so I don't really know the extent of their relationship, what they would do for each other.
You mentioned in your witness statement that you and the suspect match your stories to confirm that your statements aligned.
We both were at the same. I think our stories would definitely match. I mean, we were with each other all day.
So you both confirmed your stories before delivering your statements.
We were with each other all day, so I mean, we didn't really have that much variety in our stories.
Thank you. No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Cross-examination, please. Oh, I'm sorry, redirect, Mr. Kirschner.
I do not have one, Your Honor.
All right, then next witness for the defense, please.
The defense calls Miss Avery Becker to the stand.
All right, I'll remind you, ma'am, that you're still under oath. Please proceed, Ms. Wampler.
Please state your first and spell your last name for the record, Miss Becker.
My name is Avery Becker. Becker is Beckerer.
Why are you here today?
I'm here to defend myself because I have been unfairly accused of the murder of Coach Brackman.
How well did you know Mackenzie Brackman?
I knew him fairly well. He was my mock trial coach at Colorado High School.
How many years were you on the Colorado High School mock trial team?
All 4 years of my high school career.
Did you get along with Coach Brackman?
No, he always thought I needed to work harder, but I
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation.
Ms. Wampler?
This isn't a speculation, it's an observation that Miss Becker made.
Sustained as to the way the question was asked. You may try to rephrase.
Did you and Coach Brackman get along?
No, I always looked around and I kind of saw that he wanted me to work harder, but I felt like I was really good at doing it on the fly. Mock trial came really naturally to me. I even won the Best Attorney Award at regionals. I don't know why Coach Brackman didn't like me, but it might have been because I was better in court.
Did you have friends on the mock trial team?
Yeah, Taylor Perkins and I were good friends.
Were you friends with Alex Cifuentes?
No, we really have never gotten along. I don't know why Alex pretends that we are friends. Alex always wanted to be the big star, and to do that...
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation.
Ms. Wampler?
This is Avery Becker's observation about Alex Cifuentes.
Objection overruled. Answer the question, please.
Would you like me to repeat the question?
No, is it okay if I just continue with my response?
Yes.
Alex and I never really were friends, but he kind of pretended that we were friends. He always appeared that he wanted to be the big star, and for that, I needed to be off the team.
Did your high school have more than one mock trial team?
Yeah, there were 2 teams, and I was on the A team.
Did there come a point when you were no longer on the A team?
Yeah.
When did this happen?
About a month or so before regionals. Coach Brackman started in again about my lack of preparation before coming to practice, and before I could respond, he bumped me down to the B team.
Did you try to convince him to let you back on the A team?
Yeah, I did, but he just really didn't want me back on the A team.
Did you ever get back on the A team?
Yeah, my best friend Taylor offered to quit for me so that I could be back on the A team. Coach had no other option but to put me back on the A team once she quit. So that's exactly what happened.
Moving on to your regional tournament. Did you win any awards at this regional tournament?
Yeah, I won the Best Attorney Award, and I was also named the Best Closer, which I was really proud of.
Did Coach Brackman congratulate you on these awards?
No, he started in again on how I should have followed a script.
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
Ms. Wampler?
This is not hearsay because it is not being offered to prove the truth of the matter asserted pursuant to Rule 801.
What's it being offered for, Ms. Wampler?
It is being offered to talk about Avery and Coach Brackman's relationship.
Objection overruled. Answer the question, Ms. Harper.
Would you like me to repeat it?
Yes, please.
Did Coach Brackman congratulate you on your awards?
No, he said that I needed to follow the script, and in front of everyone, he said I didn't deserve the Best Attorney Award, and my closing was just lucky, and then he said I wouldn't do well at state.
How did this make you feel?
I was really angry. I called him the worst coach in the state, and then I did something that I regretted.
What did you do?
Before Coach chewed me out, I had been about to outline the good and the bad things that we did at regionals on the whiteboard. And when I stormed out of practice, I realized—
Ms. Becker, I think you need to get a little bit closer to the microphone. Your voice is really fading on us.
And when I stormed out of the practice, I realized that I still had the marker in my hand. When I got to the parking lot, I wrote in giant letters across the hood of his car, Worst Attorney Award.
Then what happened?
Coach Brackman came out to talk to me, and when he realized what I had done, he just exploded. He yelled and screamed, and he cut me from the team. I've done some pretty dumb things in my life, but that was one of the worst things I've ever done.
Did you apologize? Or sorry.
Yeah, the next day I went to his office to apologize, but he didn't want to see me, so I sent him a text instead, offering to get a job to get his car repainted.
Were you upset enough to kill Coach Brackman?
Of course not.
Okay, moving on to the day of the murder. Ms. Becker, where were you on March 6, 2020, the day that Coach Brackman died?
I was with Taylor Perkins, my best friend, the whole day.
What were you guys doing?
The morning, I realized that my phone was missing, so she offered to skip school with me so we could go find my phone.
Where is the last time you remember having your phone?
On March 5th at the Fry Shack when we ran into a bunch of the mockers, including Alex.
Did you
We
find
also
it?
had gone to— No, it was nowhere to be found. We kept using Taylor's phone to try and find my phone. The phone immediately went to voicemail, so we figured it was either dead or stolen. Looking back, I think that Alex could have grabbed my phone while we were at the Fry Shack.
Objection, Your Honor, speculation.
Ms. Wampler?
I can ask a follow-up question.
Objection sustained. New question.
Did Alex have access to your phone at the Fry Shack?
Yes, my phone was just on the table.
Are you aware that Alex claims that you sent him a text message asking him to help you get back on the team?
I know he claimed that, yes.
Did you send that text message?
No. Alex would be the absolute last person I would ask for help on anything. He would not have helped me. He didn't want me back on the team.
Objection, Your Honor, speculation.
Ms. Wampler?
This is not a speculation. This is Ms. Becker's observation again.
All right. The objection is overruled. The horse left the barn. The question's been answered. Next question, please.
Moving on, were you near Coach Brackman's house on the day of the murder?
No, as I have stated earlier, Taylor Perkins and I were at the mall, then at the Fry Shack, and I do not know where he lives.
Do you believe that you were set up, and if so, why?
Yes, I do believe that.
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
Ms. Wampler?
I believe we can move on to the next question.
Objection sustained. Next question.
Did you know anyone else who didn't get along with Coach Brackman?
Yeah, Blair Rollins. Coach Brackman represented Blair's dad and lost the case. Unfortunately,
Objection, Your Honor. There's a lack of personal knowledge and lack of foundation for this question.
Ms. Wampler?
Miss Becker has been told about this, so she does know about it.
The objection's overruled. And Ms. Becker, every time you move your face, we catch a little less of what you're saying.
Okay, my bad.
So let's repeat the question and see if we can't get the answer again, please.
Did you know anyone else who didn't like Coach Brackman?
Yes, Blair Rollins. Coach Brackman represented Blair's dad, and he unfortunately lost the case. Blair's dad then went to jail.
Are you aware of whether Alex and Blair were friends?
I thought they were, by the way they talked and acted around each other.
Did you watch the ring videos?
Yes.
Can you identify the person in the videos?
Yeah, I think that it looks like Blair Rollins.
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation and improper lay opinion.
Response, Ms. Wampler?
This is not speculation. This is Ms. Becker's observation as to who the person she believes who the person in the ring video she believes looks like.
Objection as to the way the question was asked. You can try to reframe the question.
Do you think you know who the person in the videos is?
Objection, Your Honor. This still calls for speculation.
Ms. Wampler, your response?
I can just move on to the next question.
Objection sustained. Next question.
Do you know if Blair Rollins is a witness in this case?
No, Blair Rollins disappeared after the murder.
Okay, I have one final question, Ms. Becker. Did you murder Mackenzie Brackman?
No, I did not.
That will be all the questions I have. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. Cross-examination, please.
Good afternoon, Ms. Becker. You believed you were one of, if not the most talented members of your mock trial team?
Yeah, mock trial I was a natural at it, so.
So you believed you had a natural talent?
Yeah.
You also believed that your old coach, Mackenzie Brackman, had a hard time accepting your natural ability.
I think that just came up in the heat of an argument, but yeah, we never got along, so.
He always criticized your work?
Yeah, he did. He was always trying to give me constructive criticism, but it always kind of hurt.
He believed that you had a bad work ethic?
He said that, and I mean, I could see I didn't really prepare.
And for that reason, you were moved down to the B team before regionals, correct?
Correct.
And this upset you?
I mean, I think it would upset anyone.
You
You prepare a lot and you're bumped down. It kind of sucks.
You believe that the B team was full of losers?
I do remember saying
Objection, relevant.
Response, Ms. Ross?
Your Honor, if she believed that the B team was full of losers, it would have made her upset, and this would have given her motive in the case of the murder of Mackenzie Brackman.
Objection overruled. Answer the question, please, Ms. Becker.
Will you please repeat the question?
Yes. You believed that the B team was full of losers, correct?
I remember saying that, but I mean, they weren't the same level of skill. So they were still talented, but I just felt like I deserved to be on the A team.
So you did say that the B team was full of losers, correct?
I did, in just kind of the heat of the moment.
So to fix this problem, your best friend, Taylor Perkins, quit the team so you could take her spot, correct?
She offered to quit because she didn't really care about mock trial as much as I did.
And so for this reason, you were moved back up to the A team and had a successful regional tournament.
Yeah, I got best closer, so I was really proud of myself.
But Brackman was still not happy?
No, he said that I just rely on my good looks, which I'll take as a compliment, but it still kind of hurt.
And he claimed that you didn't deserve the Best Attorney Award?
He said that, and I was hurt by it because I put in a lot of effort and a lot of work, and for someone to tell you that you don't deserve something that you put a lot of work into, it really sucks.
So you claim that you put a lot of work in, however, you just admitted a couple of questions ago that you were never really prepared. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, I put work in when I was in the courtroom. When I was out of the courtroom, mock trial was not my first thought.
Okay, so he believed that if you did not put more work in, that you would cause the whole team to look bad and lose the state tournament. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
This made you very angry?
I think it would make anyone angry.
So angry, in fact, that you took a black Sharpie and vandalized Brackman's white Porsche.
That is something that I deeply regret. It was kind of the heat of the moment. I was just stressed out and adrenaline got to me.
So you did commit this crime of vandalism, correct?
Yes, I did, but I also apologized afterwards.
And you got mad when Brackman had an explosive reaction to you vandalizing his car?
Yes.
And you went home and told your mom that Brackman was on your case again?
I did. I was ashamed to
Objection,
tell my
relevance.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the objection.
Objection, relevance.
Ms. Ross.
Your Honor, I'm not only establishing character for the witness, but I'm also laying foundation to further questions that will help to prove the motive.
Objection overruled. This is cross-examination. Answer the question, please, Ms. Becker.
Will you please repeat the question?
Yes. You went home and told your mom that Brackman was on your case again?
Yeah, I did say that because I was feeling just really flustered and I didn't want my mom to think of me less. So I just told her that he was on my case. And unfortunately, I never told her about the car.
So just to clarify, you failed to mention to your mom that you vandalized Brackman's car, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So your first reaction was to lie to your mother about what really happened that night?
I did lie to her, but as I've also said earlier, I was worried how she would think of my character. And it was something that came up in the heat of the moment, and I felt terrible.
So, however, you did tell her that you would get back at Brackman if it was the last thing you did, correct?
I didn't really mean that in a negative way, though. I was meaning that I was going to apologize to him.
So you did say that you would get back at him if it was the last thing you did. Is that a yes?
This question has already been
Hold on.
asked. and answered.
Ms. Wampler again. Sorry.
Objection asked and answered.
Ms. Ross.
Your Honor, the witness did not answer the question. There was not a clear response for the jury.
Objection overruled. Answer the question, Ms. Becker, please.
Will you please repeat the question, counsel?
Yes. However, you told your mother that you would get back at Brackman if it was the last thing you did. Is that a yes?
That is a yes, but I was meaning it more as I wanted to apologize to him, and I had to do that. Even if it was the last thing I did, I had to apologize.
Okay, moving on. You did not think very fondly of Brackman in general, is that correct?
That's correct. We never really got along. We were always on each other's cases because we were just two people that seemed to bump heads.
You believed he was a lousy attorney?
I do remember saying that, but I think that was in the heat of an argument.
And you also said that he had a massive ego?
I mean, again, heat of an argument.
You called him the worst coach in the state?
That is another thing that I do regret saying, but sometimes the words he would say to me at practice just got to me.
But you did make that statement, correct?
That is correct, yes.
All right. You believe that you were framed by Alex and Blair, is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
However, before this incident, you had never really given much thought to Blair at all, is that correct?
I always knew that Brackman lost her dad's case.
But you personally had never thought much about Blair before this case, is that correct?
We never really communicated.
And Blair was not involved in mock trial to any capacity?
Not that I was aware of.
On March 6th, you claimed that you were with your friend Taylor all day.
Yes, as I have stated earlier, we were at the mall, then at the Fry Shack. Then we ran into a bunch of CHS mockers at the Fry Shack that day.
But Taylor is the only one that can vouch for this?
Well, yeah, but I'm sure they could track her phone.
And you claimed that you didn't notice that your phone went missing the night before?
My mom never let me on my phone at night when I was home. I always had to have homework, then dinner time, then family time. And it was my first priority when I got home.
But you didn't notice it was missing until later the next morning, correct?
Correct, because as I just said, my mom never really let me on my phone.
Okay, but you just didn't happen to notice that your phone was missing for a very, very large chunk of time, is that correct?
It was only, like 12 hours? No, I'm not addicted to my phone.
Okay, so your best friend is the only one who can testify to your alibi for the murder of your coach?
Objection, speculation.
Response, please.
Your Honor, this is not speculation. She's simply making a statement that would be a fact.
Answer if you can. Objection is overruled. Answer if you can, Ms. Becker, please.
Can you please repeat the question?
Yes. Your best friend Taylor is the only one who can truly testify to your alibi for the murder of Mackenzie Brackman, correct?
Well, yeah, but you could probably look up her phone records.
Okay, no further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect?
Yes, briefly. Ms. Becker, do you regret things you have said in the past?
Absolutely. The things I said, I know it harms people.
Did you put the necessary work needed into mock trial?
No, and I will admit that I never really put in the same amount of effort that my teammates did, but I still tried in the courtroom.
Would you murder someone you just disagreed with?
Absolutely not, nor would I ever murder someone, no matter what.
Okay. I have no further questions. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. Does the defense rest?
The defense rests.
All right. Does the prosecution wish to make a closing statement?
Yes, Your Honor, and I request that any remaining time be left for rebuttal.
You may.
Thank you.
And would the timekeeper please tell Mr. Cruiser at the end of his closing how much time he has left, if you would, please?
Yes,
Go
Your
ahead,
Honor.
Go ahead, Mr. Cruiser.
Half-hearted, hypocritical, and a hole-filled alibi. Your Honor, members of the jury, today you've heard of the events of March 6, 2020, and have heard a case from the defense defined by these three things. Today you heard the story of Avery Becker and the anger that led her on March 6, 2020, to drive to the home of her old mock trial coach, Mackenzie Brackman, and not only attempt to break in, but get into a struggle with and stab Mr. Brackman in the shoulder with a knife from his own home, which ultimately would end his life. As you heard from Alex Cifuentes, text messages and interactions were had between Alex and Avery Becker that clearly indicated the motive Avery Becker had to commit this crime. Kyle Kuzak indicated to you that he agreed with the investigation made by Detective Markowitz and claimed that his expert opinion also stated that Avery Becker was the one to commit this crime. Detective Markowitz broke down his own investigation at the crime scene and of the call data records he used to confirm Avery Becker's whereabouts and confirm Avery Becker is the primary suspect in the case. Half-hearted. As you heard today in the cross-examination of Professor Blake Van Owen, the professor did not take all of the necessary steps and precautions to make a complete investigation that he claimed the prosecution was lacking. Failing to obtain call records, ring video records, and never visiting the crime scene himself revealed his lack of effort to complete a full investigation of his own. While you heard that the professor was here to fill in the so-called holes of the prosecution's investigation, it was apparent he intended to do so without any kind of investigation himself. Hypocritical. Professor Van Owen and the rest of the defense have tried to paint the picture of an incomplete investigation, yet failed to complete a full report themselves. Not only is Blake Van Owen hypocritical in his profession and criticizing other investigators following his own mistakes, but he himself admitted to missing some reports and data which would have made his own investigation complete. While Detective Markowitz and Kyle Kuzak spent time at the crime scene, meeting witnesses in person, following evidence, and conducting an overall thorough investigation, Professor Van Owen sat back, picking and choosing which pieces of evidence fit his own narrative properly, a narrative in which he accuses Blair Rollins of this crime for reasons neither investigated nor proven. Clearly, as we sit here today in trial, Avery Becker is the defendant, not Blair Rollins or another unrelated Colorado high school student. The defense tried to tell you our investigation was complete, yet failed to complete a full investigation of their own. And lastly, a hole-filled alibi. Opposing counsel has also made an attempt to establish an alibi for the defendant, one in which, from the beginning of this investigation, Ms. Becker coincidentally lost her phone the day prior to the death. While this story may appear plausible, it seems rather odd that their apparent search for the phone happened to occur along the exact same cell tower path that would lead Avery Becker from her own home to that of Mackenzie Brackman. Furthermore, the defense has yet to bring to you, the jury, anyone who can attest to the alibi of Taylor Perkins and Avery Becker from March 6, 2020. So, members of the jury, will you in your deliberations choose to trust the word of two teenage best friends or the facts and investigation of a 19-year veteran detective? Today, members of the jury, you were read jury instruction number 2, which reads, the burden of proof is upon the prosecution to prove to the satisfaction of the jury beyond a reasonable doubt. And today, the prosecution has met that burden. As the prosecution, we today have proven to you beyond a reasonable doubt that on March 6th, 2020, Avery Becker unlawfully, feloniously, and knowingly broke an entrance into, entered, or remained unlawfully after a lawful or unlawful entry in the dwelling of Mackenzie Brackman, which is located at 444 South Flower Street, with the intent to commit therein the crime of criminal mischief. And during the course and furtherance of that crime, the death of Mackenzie Brackman was caused by anyone. If you, the jury, find this to be true, based on the overwhelming evidence of Avery Becker's guilt with which you've been presented today, then you must, in fact, find Avery Becker guilty on the counts of second-degree burglary of dwelling and murder in the first degree. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cruiser. For the defense, please. Ms. Cruiser?
Atrocious, assumed, and accused. Your Honor, members of the jury, today we, the defense, have established that Avery Becker is in fact innocent of the charges that the prosecution has brought against her. She's not guilty of burglarizing the home of the victim, and she is certainly not guilty of murdering her coach, Mackenzie Brackman. Atrocious. Today, we have heard testimony about the atrocious investigation conducted by the prosecution that was rushed and incomplete. Expert witness Blake Van Owen explained all of the deficiencies in the investigation, including the police's failure to fully investigate the alternative suspects, to verify the so-called text messages that may have been fabricated by Alex Fuentes, to recognize the deficiencies and limitations of their cell phone location evidence, and their failure to investigate Avery Becker's alibi and her missing cell phone. All we got today from the prosecution was a load of evidence that at best describes how the victim was murdered, but completely lacked any proof as to who was responsible of the murder. The prosecution introduced photos of a crime scene that contained no proof that Avery Becker was at the victim's house on March 6, 2020, and they found no DNA or fingerprints evidence to establish that she was there. Assumed. The police made a number of erroneous assumptions in this case, which were described by the prosecution's own witnesses. You've heard the prosecution say that Avery Becker murdered Mackenzie Brackman, yet their main evidence came from screenshots of a text conversation that was never verified and allegations that Miss Becker and her mock trial coach didn't always get along. Detective Markowitz admitted that he relied on the photographs of screenshots provided by Alex Fuentes, but never verified them. Their own crime scene investigator, Kyle Kuzak, testified that no DNA or fingerprints belonging to my client were found at the crime scene, and that they identified 2 other suspects, but failed to fully investigate them. Kyle Kuzak could only tell you how Coach Brackman was murdered, but had no evidence to prove who did it or why the crime was committed. The prosecution also relied on testimony of Alex Fuentes, a high school student who always wanted the role that Avery Becker had on the mock trial team and who never actually provided her own phone to the police, but merely provided screenshot photographs of an alleged text conversation that could have easily been doctored. You heard from Professor Blake Van Owen, who pointed out holes in the prosecution's misplaced assumptions and established a more likely suspect in this case, named Blair Rollins. Another high school student, Colorado high school student, who had a motive to want to harm Mackenzie Brackman. After all, Blair Rollins' father is serving a jail sentence because Mackenzie Brackman lost his criminal case and has been missing since the time of the murder. You also heard from Miss Becker's best friend, Taylor Perkins, who verified Avery Becker's alibi on the day of the murder, and who told you that even though Avery Becker and the victim had their disagreements, that Avery Becker would never murder her own coach. Finally, you heard from the defendant herself, who acknowledged her past disagreements with Coach Brackman, with embarrassment and sorrow for her behavior. Avery Becker accepted responsibility for her childish behavior and her past mistakes, and she testified about how her missing cell phone and her alibi for the time of the murder. Accused. You are all well aware that my client has been wrongfully accused of burglarizing the home of her coach and of murdering him in his home. Avery Becker is no murderer. She was a frustrated and stressed out teen who made a stupid mistake of drawing on her coach's car. She did not have enough hate in her heart to kill someone, especially her own coach. Today, you were provided with an alibi, an alternative suspect, and an apology by Miss Becker for her past behavior. I am certain that once you look at the facts and consider all of the evidence in this case, that you will find Avery Becker not guilty of crimes that she has been charged with. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cruiser. Timekeeper, how much time does Mr. Cruiser have remaining?
He has 45 seconds remaining.
Mr. Cruiser, do you care to offer a rebuttal?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Atrocious, assumed, and accused. Those are the three themes that the defense has given you today in order to try to prove that Avery Becker did not commit this crime. The only thing atrocious about this investigation was the way it was handled by Professor Van Owen, completing a partial investigation that is yet to show that Avery Becker had nothing to do with this crime. The only thing assumed in this case was the defense assuming that Taylor Perkins and Avery Becker were telling the truth about searching for Avery's phone, and not simply covering up for Avery Becker's mistake. And lastly, accused. The defense tried to make an accusation of their own in today's case, accusing Blair Rollins of committing this crime, just to distract you, the jury, from the truth that Avery Becker was the only one that had the ability to commit this crime. And with that, I ask that you return with a verdict of guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cruiser. All right, we're going to give the timekeepers a few moments to prepare their score sheets. And then we will proceed to some